on fire. Take it away.
Right. Well, let me start to share my screen. But tonight, what I'm going to do is take you through kind of a wonderful stroll through botany, but particularly with fire. And so let me share. It's all set. Everybody can see? Sounding good? Yeah? Okay, cool. Let's get started. So when we talk about the botany of fire, plants and animals have adapted to these fire ecosystems for thousands of years. And what's incredible is that they have come up with amazing adaptations to survive in these areas. And a lot of those adaptations in the way that they've evolved actually require them to have fire. So fire may be scary for us, but it's actually a necessity for a lot of environments that are adapted to fire. So California is not the only place adapted to fire because and it's not just dry places, and I'll go through that too. So to get us situated, we must start at home. So home is where the hearth is, and that is Southern California for us. And I always want to do big picture first, and I start my way and make down to finer details. And so when I talk about the Mediterranean climate, California is one of 5 places in the world that has this climate. And so what's special about this climate is that the rain falls in the winter and it's dry in the summer, which is not typical of most of the world. So of the 5 Mediterranean regions, you've got California, the Mediterranean basin where we get the name from, Western South Australia, Western South Africa, and also Central Chile. What's so special about them is together the landmass makes just about 2% or a little bit more of the world's landmass, but we hold 20% of the world's biodiversity of plants altogether. And in California, 1/3 of the plants found in California can only be found in California, and that's a term called endemic. So what's so cool about these regions is there are things that cannot be found anywhere else in the world, and that's why I think it's so important and so special to grow our own flora here, because again, it was adapted to this environment. You will not find it anywhere else, and other parts of the world are scrambling always to try to grow the amazing California flora, but it does the best here because this is home. And so as you can see, the Mediterranean regions are located on the western sides of continents between 30 and 40 degrees latitude, and they're always adjacent to a desert. So that's really cool to see that there's this pattern that you see all around the world where these regions are. And so getting close, this is kind of the general California climate. Sometimes some people will draw the little area up into Washington as well as a northern Mediterranean climate, but it's really California, bits of Oregon is the proper, as they say, Mediterranean climate. And so, like I said, the rest of the world, aside from the Mediterranean climate, rain falls in the growing months or the warm months, which is great for plants, right? When they're active, when it's warm, there's water available, plants are doing their thing, they're happy. And that is the rest of the world minus the Mediterranean climates. And you may say, well, Terry, what about the deserts? Well, deserts also get the rain in the summers. Think of those monsoon seasons or the thunderstorms that roll through Arizona. That is typical. Whereas with the Mediterranean climate, everything's flopped the other way. And that's what makes us so special and in our biodiversity, because plants and animals have to evolve to such a different set of circumstances. So wet when it's cooler and then dry when it's hotter. Okay, now that we have a sense of where we are, let's talk about these ecosystems. And so in California,
the only one that's humming burn baby burn in my head.
Yeah, Terry, love your titles.
Thank you. I try to be cute. Sometimes they're too dad jokey, so let me know if that's the case, and I'll update it for next time.
Okay. Will do.
Thank you. So fire-adapted ecosystems exist all over the world, not just in California. So as you can see, those patches in red are fire dominated, and you'll look and you go, oh my God, the Arctic? Yes, there are places in the Arctic that are dominated by fire, and fire plays a crucial role in a lot of ecosystems. But let's get back to California. So the 4 plant communities that we really think of and fire, because we also live in these plant communities, are I'm getting ahead of myself, but here's a list of some of the areas that fire environments are adapted to fire. So the African savannas, the Central Plains. There are also plains in South America, of course, the chaparral, all of the chaparral regions of the 5 Mediterranean climates, forests, so many different environments. But if we get back to California, so speaking of chaparral, this is a classic image of a chaparral, fire adapted. All of these plants have some kind of adaptation to survive, or maybe not survive, but also bring on the next generation of plants. And a chaparral is really, really fire adapted. So here's some species that you might see around town, or if you go hiking.
Or if you go to Theodore Payne.
Yes, or Theodore Payne.
In the demonstration gardens, we have them.
Yes. What better way to get close up, close and personal, get a really great kind of moment to like really learn the plants. And then when you go out hiking, you get a better sense of what's around you because you really understand all the friends that are out there. And so chaparral really adapted to fire. Now we've got oak woodlands. That's another environment that's adapted to fire. Look at all that grass.
Yes.
And here are some plants, iconic plants of the oak woodland. That beautiful red plant at the bottom, yes, poison oak. Glorious, right? And it does everything. But unfortunately, some of us are very allergic to it. So wonderful plants of the oak woodland. This one is fire adapted, but not as frequently as the other two. So fires may sweep through the chaparral a little bit more frequently in geologic history and grasslands, but with the coastal sage scrub, this is what a picture of a typical one would look like, tend to not burn as much or often. And one way you can tell is if you see plants in an environment that may or may not be a fire adapted environment and you see succulents, that's how you go, you can stop and go, ooh, maybe fire's not necessarily meant to be here frequently or at all, because desert species or succulent things, cacti, do not do well with fire. So that's
Why
a
is
good
that?
indicator. They just are too juicy. They can't,
Succulents
they're
too
not adapted
juicy.
for it. Yeah.
Not enough
And-
fuel.
Yeah, in desert areas, and this is not desert, but areas that don't tend to have fire, they will come along because they don't regenerate really well after fire. So I'm sure there might be an exception in nature, but in general, that's kind of the rule of thumb.
So what are some of the plants that we're looking at in this picture?
Well, you could see the buckwheat, you could see the sticky monkey flower, the bush monkey flower. There's some ferns, if you believe it or not. This must be a damp area, ferns poking through, so all sorts of fun stuff. And I think yarrow, I think that might be yarrow with the brown kind of domed head, seed heads.
Oh, yeah.
Love it. There's some iconic species of coastal sage scrub. So you've got sagebrush, of course, white sage, the California buckwheat, even that brittle bush, or I call it coastal sunflower, but that's not what it's called. And of course, the fourth one out of, there's so many environments, but I'm just highlighting the four. Coniferous forests of Southern California also are fire adapted. And so some of the species you might see, let's say if you go up to the Angeles National Forest, you got big cone Douglas fir, ponderosa pine, Jeffrey pine, white fir. Okay, now let's get into the adaptations. This is what I love to talk about, how plants and nature and animals get really ingenious, because necessity is the mother of invention. Yes, necessity is the mother of invention. So many plants have found so many ways to survive fire. So the first group of plants are fire-intolerant species, meaning they will completely burn and die. And that's okay, because that's a part of their cycle and that's just what's supposed to happen. And so whatever remnants that are there will burn away, or they're the seeds that are waiting in the soil bank to come up after a big fire. So reseeders are a part of fire-intolerant species. A lot of them are annuals, but not all of them. They can be herbaceous perennials or even woody plants that just have to burn away completely and they start over from seed. And here are some examples. You've got the whispering bells, big flower Phacelia, point leaf manzanita, woolly leaf ceanothus, but these plants have adapted to just completely going. And one of the reasons why that a plant may pick this evolutionary track is that it forces the plant populations to really get genetically diverse. Because if an individual doesn't make it through the fire, but seeds come back from it, you're always refreshing the population genetics and making sure that new individuals are coming through.
See a
Here's
note
an
that's
example.
kinda crazy.
After fire, the annuals coming through. So those wildflowers that we see, a lot of the times, there are ones that won't come up unless there's a fire, like that poppy I had in the first image. That was a fire poppy. So really, you only see them after a fire. All right, fire-intolerant species. So second group. So these plants can take a lot of damage from fire, and then they will grow back. Often it's just the top that burns off, and then they grow back from the roots. They can even sprout from crowns or stems, and we call them the resprouters. So they are really quick to come back from the base. And many of the woody species that have these adaptations live in chaparral ecosystems. So here's a picture of melasma coming back. And what's really
Larina.
yes, yes.
That's my drag name.
Love it. I hope you like set yourself on fire in a way where it's like super cool, but then it's safe.
Yeah.
And the common
Pyrotechnic
name
show
for that,
included.
for anyone wondering, the common name is laurel sumac.
Yeah.
Thank you. And so after fire, you could see all these resprouters coming back. I know the eucalyptus, not native, but they come from a fire dominated ecosystem, and they too can resprout after fire. And that's why they do so well in our environment here, a little too well. So, but as you can see, the Arctostaphylus, the Toyon, the Chemise, all of these are resprouters. Okay, I can't not mention Lignotubers. So I don't know if you guys have
Lignotubers.
watched the video that Tim was on, but he mentions Lignotubers. But what a Lignotuber is a swelling underground. It's not a caudex. People are into caudeciforms. Those are swollen stems or roots to hold water. The purpose of this swelling underground is that roughness all up in there, there's lots of dormant buds. So whether you cut all the branches down or if a fire comes through, it can resprout from those dormant buds from the base. So often that's why if the species are adapted to this kind of top killing in fire. If you plant it in your garden, you can cut the tops off and they'll resprout and look really fresh and rejuvenated. And that's because these plants are adapted for that. And sometimes they kind of need it to be able to move on with their life cycle. So
do you think,
yeah.
Random question, Terry. So do you think plants with lignotubers would make good bonsais since they're able to be cut back a lot?
Oh, if you want to go for that, I don't know bonsai very well, but I think they would if you want that like you know the sparse shoots like some bonsai have, like where you make like a little forest scene. That might be really good for that.
That could be done theoretically.
Yeah. It would be a big bonsai though.
We have a member that does bonsai, and it's California natives, and it's a lot of Arctostaphylus, some oak trees, some junipers. I think he's got a maple in there, and we're trying to get him to give a class. So send out the good vibes, because that would be an awesome class.
Oh, I would love that. That's amazing. Oh, and the Lignotuber on the top right, again, eucalyptus, I know, but just to show you, it happens all around the world. Okay, this is a cool one because in this picture, you've got both a reseeder and a resprouter. And you guys guess, and I know you can't answer, but I will answer for you.
Wait, guess in the chat, guess in the chat.
Oh yeah, guess in the chat. Let's do it. I forgot, it's interactive.
What do you think this is?
Okay, which one's a resprouter? Which one's a reseeder? I'll give you the answer. And what do you think it is?
Oh wait, I think it might say on the bottom. But
oh,
I didn't say
the
it's
species.
Covered up a little bit.
So I see 3 different species. Are we guessing like?
We can guess species. We guess species, or just tell me which one is resprouting and which one is reseeding.
Okay.
Oh.
That's the main thing, because we can always use plant Calflora to help, but but I want to see.
Let's see, Alicia in the chat said Toyon, but she didn't say which one. So demerit for Alicia.
Wow.
Oh my goodness, that is hard.
Let's see, Edgar guessed resprouter Matilla hapapi and reseeding Toyon. Lucia, Toyon is the resprout. Oh my goodness, you guys are putting in with things way faster than I can see them. Penny, scrub oak. Alicia's laughing because she's a teacher. Well, it's a good thing it's summer and you're off, Alicia, because you're not on your game.
Not following directions.
And so that, you know, with 100% respect to all educators and teachers assistants and everyone that takes their time to really spread knowledge. Thank you for that.
Okay. Terry, do we have an answer?
I do. So see these guys? Those are the resprouters. So the one in the middle is actually a what?
The buckwheat?
Yes. It's either, I think it's chamise, or it could be buckwheat.
Oh, off to the right.
On the far right-hand side?
On the far right. That one was not ID'd. So, and I'm not the best with how blurry it is, but my guess is either chamise or buckwheat.
I can't see, so.
Okay, great.
I would have to.
Now, the middle ones, the three middle arrows, the top ones, I would say, that is a manzanita. And I know it doesn't look like it because you're like, wait a second, there's little hairs on it and toothed leaves. Well, manzanitas, when they sprout up with young foliage, they get little teeth sometimes and they have hairs and they lose it with age.
No way. Trick question.
Okay. And now
it's good to know that plants lose their hair when they get old too.
Yes. I'm personally going through that now. So I saw it in my father and now it's happening. Now, the bottom three, those resprouters are bush poppies, Dendromicon. So, and because I remember when I looked at this photo, I was like, is it Matilaha poppy? But it's Dendromicon. So
it's
super
hard
cool.
to tell.
All together, right? The ecosystem's doing its thing. All right, thanks for participating.
Where was that fire?
That fire, I don't know. I found the image on CalFlora because it was a perfect example of what I needed. So we can go back to CalFlora and I can look it up for you. Don't expose me.
Oh,
I'm kidding.
I'm here to learn, Terry. I'm here to learn.
So the third group, we've got fire-resistant species that often have minor fire damage. They can get away with it. And some of the adaptations include like really thick bark, or the branches are really high up from the ground. So whatever's burning below doesn't catch the branches above. Another name, a fancy name, if you want to throw this around at parties, is passive pyrophytes. So that's a really good term if you want to use that. And there are many really tall trees in these environments that are fire resistant. So one that's a passive pyrophyte, of course, giant sequoia. We don't really think a lot about the fires up in the Sierra, oh my God, I almost said Sierra Madre. That's not
Northern California.
Yes, in Northern California. Thank
Reading.
you.
Hello, Reading. How are you?
Yes. But with the giant sequoias, look at how thick that bark is. Look at the people with their little heads and look how chunky that bark is in that cut. It's like the thickness of a person's head. So you can imagine a fire sweeping by, not really being able to penetrate in, and that's what the bark is doing. Next door, non-native, but we've got cork oak from the Mediterranean basin, but look how chunky that bark is. Again, protecting the plant from fire. Really, really smart. Now you could go the opposite direction. If in evolutionary history, growing really tall, getting really high branches, getting thick bark is too much work, why not evolve into a bulb? You're living deep underground and you could pop up right after a fire. And often the fires, if they're not burning too hot or too big, a bulb will get away unscathed. So, you know, blue dicks and the Mariposa lilies do great after a fire.
So Terry,
yes.
Would Lignotubers be basically giant gargantuan bulbs?
Botanically speaking, no, but for our purposes, kind of.
Okay, I like our purposes. We have good purposes.
It's just like an insurance policy hiding away underground.
Yeah,
sometimes it's
storage.
Exposed. Yes, a great storage place with a lot of bulbs, because sometimes if like a bulb often has like one growing point in it, a lignotuber has multiple buds. So it'll come up, it will really resprout. Whereas
all
a bulb
those bumps.
All those bumps, honey. All those bumps, give way to leaves.
We have a question from Delia.
Oh, what's the question?
how do the blue dicks and Mariposa lily deal with fire physiologically? So what happens after they burn?
So what happens is that they don't get touched by it because their bulbs are quite deep underground, unless it's a really hot burning fire and a slow burning fire. Otherwise, they're not actually getting touched by the fire, because by that point, when the fire is sweeping through, those bulbs are dormant. So it's really just the dried material. So
crispy above the ground.
So it would be like a creme brulee where it's like hot and melted on the top, but underneath it's still soft and sweet.
Yes.
All right. It's dinner time, y'all.
Great visual, Brenda.
Love it. So yeah, so luckily those bulbs, they don't have to deal with the fire because they're so far underground. They're so well insulated that they just kind of sit there and let it happen. Great adaptation. So back to the giant sequoia, fires do happen up, you know, in the mountains where they are. And so as you can see in this cross section of a tree, those are the years when a fire has swept through, and you can see the scarring, and then the tree will regrow around the scar and cover it up. And it's really cool to see that that's, you know, it's happened so much and the tree just kind of moves on. And that's how you can tell that it's a fire resistant plant, because it just takes a little bit of it and it's totally fine and continues to grow and live. So super, super cool.
That is cool because, you know, without actually measuring, the increments look pretty even.
Yes, yeah. And that's, I'll get to it, but like fire regimes in ecosystems, when it's hard to, I don't want to say untouched by man, because a lot of fire ecosystems have been touched by man and continue to, but there's this almost this regular kind of beat to it, which is really great for opening up spaces for biodiversity, for plants to come through. And I'll get to that in a second, but you're right, it looks irregular.
Yeah, so one right here, someone asked if these numbers were years. Yes, right? So
this should be years, yes.
You know, this tree was here pre-Columbian.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Old plants. Okay, with fire-resistant trees, do you notice anything here that's so similar between the three of them, even though they don't come from the same ecosystem or the same like geographic regions?
Drop it in the chat if you have a clue.
Yeah, do you see any similarities structurally? Like, what do you notice?
I noticed leaves.
Yes, you notice leaves. Good, it's alive.
They are giraffes. Okay, no one go to Alicia's classroom.
There are giraffes. Actually, I like that answer.
Yes, no, I see. I see the giraffe-ness.
I agree with Delia or Delia.
Yes.
High canopies.
Super high canopies. And in the case of the eucalyptus, bark that's so smooth that the fire can't really run up it, right? Whereas the stone pine in the middle, that's where we get our pine nuts for pesto come from in the Mediterranean. Also high canopy, high branches, thick bark, same with the giant sequoia. So great adaptation to deal with fire. Okay, one, fire-induced serotiny. Sounds scary, but what it basically is, it's cones or wooden fruits that need fire to open to disperse seeds. So there's lots of different forms of serotiny. So you've got like fruits or seeds that need water to open, or heat, fire, you know, all sorts of things. For fire adapted ecosystems, it's fire induced. And so you'll see a lot of conifers that will have this, where the scales are sealed shut. And without the high heat of a fire, or maybe even a very hot day, these cones won't open because the resin has to reach a specific temperature to melt, open, and then let the seeds fly out. And the reason why a lot of these plants will do this is because if a fire has swept through underneath the understory and has melted these cones, chances are there's no competition down below, and the fire has created ash, which is great fertilizer for the new seeds to grow in. And that is the time to release the seeds, because the seeds will have the best chance to germinate and grow and become the next generation. So here's some examples. We got 2 natives and 2 non-natives, but the cypress at the top left, there's one near the shop, the bookshop at Theodore Payne. It's kind of behind it. There's no cones on it now, but super cool. It's a rare conifer that is one of the only conifers that shows up really in the chaparral in California, down here anyway. But what Evan told me, what was really cool is that that's one of the easiest plants if there are botanists who need to go collect seeds. And if we need to extract the seeds, like a horticulturist will be growing, whether it's for conservation efforts or whatnot, you could take those cones, put them in the oven, and I can't remember what temperature he said, but you just pop them to like, I think maybe it was like 200 degrees.
I think it's 200.
200?
Yeah. I was also told that about Banksia by Joe from Australian Native Plants.
There you go, Banksia.
Do not, she said, don't light it on fire. You can just put it in the oven, low and slow until it pops open.
There we go. And all those cones are like it. Even leucadendrons, which come from South Africa, huge fire-dominated ecosystem. And there are lots of plants.
Adapt that to current times. So in an air fryer, can we
air fryer?
Air fry.
That's if you want it to be crispy.
Okay.
Yes. I don't know if the seeds would appreciate that.
Okay.
But with the South African flora, remember, if you've watched that video I did on germinating seeds using fire and smoke, if not, please watch that video on YouTube on the Theater.
Let's put the link in the chat.
Yeah. So I will mention these smoke paper discs. And those smoke paper discs, the main company that makes it is South African. And the reason why is because so much of the South African flora, especially in the Mediterranean side on the West Coast, they need fire in order to open their cones, but not only that, for the seeds to germinate. And so, and the reason that's the case for that environment is because the soils are so poor in nutrients that a lot of the plants encourage and wait for fire in order to drop their seeds, because the plant knows that during that time, that is where the most nutrients are available. So then the new seedlings can really quickly grow and establish themselves. And
Where's
it's not
some
that
of the nutrients in the fire?
You've got a lot of potash, which is phosphorus, and that's a really, really scant element, especially in the South African soils. Here in North America, or in California, our phosphorus levels are not too bad, so that's okay. But when you think of like Australia and South Africa, if people are growing things from there in those Mediterranean regions, specifically like the proteaceous things that you see in this picture, they don't like phosphorus, and that's because naturally those soils are quite devoid of phosphorus. So, but that potash really helps with that. And there's little bits of nitrogen in there as well. So lots of good stuff. Okay, so we talk about fire-dominant ecosystems being dry, but I want to show you a really cool one that's actually really wet. So in the chat, does anyone know where this place is?
Looks like Florida. Oh, we're supposed to put that in the chat?
Yeah, put it in the chat. Let's see how many people say where it looks like, what it looks like.
Okay.
And then kudos to anyone who's ever walked through that particular ecosystem.
It looks like a swamp.
So what's everyone saying?
Or a bog.
Yes.
People are saying Florida, Louisiana, Tennessee.
Georgia.
All right, you guys are hitting it. So Florida, South Carolina, a little bit of Georgia, that area, the long, I realized I wrote the answer down the bottom, but the long leaf pine savannas of the Southeast. Yes, very wet and swampy. See, notice how the pine trees are giraffe? And underneath there is no understory except for grass, right? And that's because fire sweeps through this environment as well. And it keeps it open, and it allows other species to come through. Species like carnivorous plants that are native to the Southeast, like the more iconic ones. Of course, we have Darlingtonia up in Northern California, but these guys need that. And the reason why is the fire again sweeps through underneath, opens up all these clearings, so that way these smaller plants can survive and come through and not have to compete with the grass. And fire really helps balance ecosystems that are adapted to it, to give everybody a chance, all the different species, to show up, because everyone and all the different species show up differently. Some, like some of us in our society, we live on the edge, right? We're the annuals, like we need that disturbance. There's some people who love that. They love that like fun, artsy life. And then there are other plants, like people who want that stable life, right? So you've got the long-lived trees that kind of hang around there and do their thing. So the fire helps reset these different areas to allow all the species to be able to come through and have a day in the sun. And so, as you can see, the fire sweeps through quickly. They too, in the Southeast, are trying to incorporate prescribed fire practices, again, regular burning, because it was withheld for so long that it's altering the ecosystems. And as you can imagine, another way of dealing with fire is if you adapt it in a really wet area and there's fire, like this Venus flytrap, if you grow really low to the ground and flat, you're just sitting against really wet, boggy soil. So the fire will sweep across and you won't get burned because you're just sitting on top of wet soil. So just try to lean away from the fire and you'll be okay. Super cool.
Wow, so that's why they're so flat like that.
And to get that sunlight. And if you're going to be adapted that flat, you better not have any grasses competing with you, right? So let that fire come through. All right, cleansing fire, maintaining biodiversity. So the role of fire is to cycle nutrients into the soil, because if a place has been growing for a while, yeah, there's a little bit of decomposition, particularly in drier areas. That decomposition is a little slower, so the nutrients don't cycle as quickly. A fire can really push that cycling and allow more of it to get back into the soil. Refreshing the gene pool. So if certain plants have been there much longer, do pass, the new generation that comes will have new sets of genetics that might be better adapted to the environment, or new genetics that might be better adapted to a future environment. So making sure that the gene pool turns over regularly is a really good thing, because biodiversity or diversity not only in individuals but in genetics is really, really good. Because a population can get too inbred, and we don't want that. That's nothing good has ever come from inbreeding. Just look at all our classical literature. So, and the thing with fire is it also clears away debris and helps with competition. So you can open up those spaces where there are plants that are not good at competing, but are really good at taking advantage of a really brief moment in time. So like the reseeders that come through, they can't compete with those big plants, but they can withstand and endure living in really harsh conditions. And that's when they shine, as they come up in those moments.
So they're the slow and steady wins the race plant?
Yeah, they're slow and steady, which are the ones that kind of resprout or are fire resistant, but then the live hot, young, and die fast, or whatever the saying is, those are the annuals or the reseeders that come back afterwards. So, and again, this fire opens up those spaces. So when you look at the landscape as a whole from like a bird's eye view, it creates this patchwork and this mosaic. So again, all the species can be represented in one area, and it totally really maintains biodiversity. Because if you let one thing grow for too long, and we call that the climax of an ecosystem, which is actually a thing that we don't believe in anymore because it's a cycle. That cycle allows all the species to come through.
Did you say climax of an ecosystem?
Yes.
Okay.
You know how like in school you learn like there's a pioneer species and it goes to the final like climax, or the old trees and everything. Well, if that was the case, the ecosystem would have very few species in the end, because you've just got the dominant species. So this disturbance, this gentle kind of frequent disturbance, really helps open up areas for other ones to come through.
Yeah, when I think of climax, I think of a story, and you get to the climax, that's like where everything happens. And then from there, it's all downhill. So you don't want a climax in nature. Why? You want a steady story, forever ongoing things, regenerating, resprouting.
Yes, exactly. That's a great analogy.
Hey, look, I'm learning, Terry.
I love that.
If everybody else is learning, drop it in the chat. Give us a thumbs up.
The thing is, but with humans, where there's humans, things get complicated. Because of us, nowadays in modern history, we're because of our actions, we're changing fire intensity and frequency. So these environments that have adapted to a type of fire, whether it's fast burning and it moves through, it's frequent or infrequent, there is a type of intensity and frequency that each ecosystem that's adapted to fire is adapted to. But By introducing new species, we change that balance. Things burn differently from different ecosystems. And also by withholding fire, we're also creating more fuel, so fires get bigger and really hotter and can be slower burning. And climate change, of course, is really changing that balance as well, because it's harder to predict. And so Smokey the Bear wasn't entirely right. There's some instances where you really do want to suppress fire and keep it safe, but it's like, that's like a blanket statement across all the forests in the United States or environments, right? Each place is so unique and different, and they have a different set of needs. And so when it comes to the fires in these fire-dominated ecosystems, I'm glad there's a movement now to really start to heed Indigenous knowledge, because they've been working with fire and the ecosystem for so long. And a lot of research is coming back and seeing like, oh, that fire is really beneficial to maintain that biodiversity. And so the best way to really help kind of curb this, I know it seems gloom and doom, but just plant our native plants. That's like one of the easiest things. Don't try to plant too many things that are introduced, because we don't know how long it will take before maybe they will escape the garden and grow out in wild areas, or their unintended consequences, right? We just can't foresee and see that far in the distance. And so one of the easiest ways is just plant native plants, because the ecosystem is already adapted to it. Nature, the wildlife here is asking for that, the food and having the shelter and the habitats. So to really help regulate with the way that the fire is going, if you plant our native plants, we'll try to maintain that balance. It's more complicated than that, but that's a great, easy first step. And so I want to say thank you. Without fire in our ecosystems, it wouldn't be this beautiful or this diverse. And I want to end with, though fire may be really scary at the individual level, and we mourn the death of an individual, but the fire is greater than that. It actually helps maintain the community, the group as a whole. And so we shouldn't fear and mourn the individual. Yes, it's sad, but that fire has a role and a purpose, and it makes way for the community to prosper as a whole. So that's my message. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry.
Thanks,
That was
Terry.
so much information to take in such a small amount of time. So we have time for questions and hopefully answers. You can drop them in the chat. You can raise your hand, etc. But we will take questions. One of the questions I have, Terry, when we were looking at the slide of Florida, that regime would be low intensity, high frequency fire, okay, versus California, which would be high intensity, low frequency.
Yes.
Or did I just say the same thing? I don't know.
No, parts of California.
Parts of California, because LA.
Yeah.
Right. When I say California, I just mean Los Angeles.
Southern California.
Yeah, not even Southern California, just LA.
Just LA, yeah.
Okay, so question from chat: how would intensity get changed? That's a really good question.
The fire intensity. So when we, for example, like the introduced species I'm thinking about are the grasses. There are lots of grasses that European annual grasses, or from Central Asia, just grasses that are adapted to drier environments that are not adapted to this Mediterranean climate. So our grasses are a little slower growing, and they get larger, they're fuller, and they are really deep rooted, and they are longer lived. Of course, we have annual grasses, but our bunch grasses are the predominant grasses that should be in the environment here. The introduced species that we've brought accidentally or on purpose, what happens is they will grow and outcompete a lot of the native plants and grasses and produce a lot of biomass, which is a lot of fuel. And those in environments that may not have that much fuel that quickly. And so as we add more fuel, it changes the intensity of that fire, because there's just more to burn. And there's some things that burn hotter than others, or longer and slower. And so it's those introduced species that we're not sure about that could change that. And we're seeing that now with the introduced grasses, that's the case.
What
about,
oh, I'm sorry, Kate.
Sorry, does that go for like the black mustard as well with the yellow flowers that you see everywhere?
Yeah, I would say too, like, I don't know if there's any specific research on that, but I wouldn't be surprised because it's, again, a fuel that wouldn't have been there previously, right?
Yeah, and it grows really quickly and then reseeds really quickly, and then it gets really crispy and dry.
Oh, and then the reseeding, of course, like after a fire, you can change.
Yeah.
This is not about intensity, but the palette of the plants is that maybe the introduced species will have so much in the seed bank that after a fire, the only thing that really comes up are the mustards or anything that's been introduced because there's so much of them. And the native species might not have a chance to poke their way through and compete well. So that's another implication of having this introduced species.
Okay, so question, what happens, so if California, Los Angeles is the chaparral specifically is used to high intensity, low frequency fires, and we're slowly moving to high intensity, high frequency fires, what's that going to do to our flora?
That means anything that is slower growing, that is a reseeder or a resprouter, will be knocked back so often that they exhaust themselves and then can die. So like, for example, if it's high intensity and it's not frequent, but becomes frequent. So for example, the manzanitas or the ceanothus that don't sprout back, but have to grow from seeds. A manzanita can grow kind of quickly in a garden, but out in nature, they're pretty slow growing. Same with the ceanothus. So if that fire is high intensity and it comes more often than it should, those plants will die before they can reproduce. And then you will start to lose the species. So that's changing that balance. So the species that need a bit more time in between fires are not able to grow back. And so that is not really good because something else will move into its place, but often it's an introduced species because they may be adapted to like a frequent fire environment, and that's what they're made for, and they can just slip right in and do their thing.
Terry, from a botanical standpoint, how long would it take for native California plants in chaparral to adapt to the higher intensity, higher frequency
Oh, that's
fire?
a tough question. I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know. And I believe there's research looking into that now. Like that's a high area of interest, but again, with research, if it's not quite sexy, it might not get enough money. So that's an area that I think would be really important to look into, but that's a hard one to say because again, nature does its own thing sometimes, and we may think we have it figured out, but then we go, oh, actually, it's this other thing.
Yeah. So question from chat, there's a lot of them. Thank you all.
Oh yeah.
What's inside of a lignotuber? Yes, I want to know.
Oh, it just looks like wood. It just looks like wood. But underneath the surface of the bark, there's all these dormant buds. So it just looks like a regular old, like kind of wooden burl. But then all that new growth will come from those buds that you can't see, but are in between those little craggy bits.
So it's kind of like the buds are closer to the outside.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so the inside, is that like dead wood or like what is inside the trunk of a tree?
Yes. So, that's the thing. I don't know if you guys know, if you want to use this at a dinner party to really impress people, when you look at a tree, the majority of it is actually dead, as you said, Katie. The only part that's alive is that little green sliver around the edge underneath the bark. That is the only live part of the plant.
The cambium?
Yes, the cambium. So everything else on the inside of a tree is dead. Crazy, right?
It's like a stalk.
Yes.
It's kind of like a sock around the tree.
Yes. A live sock, yes.
A live living sock. Trees are dead inside.
Yes.
Yes.
Like everyone else.
We had a couple of questions that got skipped.
Yeah. From
Alicia.
Danny. Oh no. Do more frequent fires affect species diversity?
Danny's got answered.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
I think, yeah. Alicia said, how do I convince my neighbors that live oaks do not burn easily, do not need much, if any, trimming, and are in fact ember catchers during a fire?
I think you just tell them that they're ember catchers. So
So,
live oak.
Well, but they do burn though, right? Because weren't you saying they have lignotubers?
The live oaks,
Or they don't?
the live oaks are the ones that have the thick bark. The oak, that's why when you have like a fire burning and you want it to go, you know, all night, and you're going to burn oak because it's a slow burning wood versus pine that's, you know, super fast. And Alicia, we have a fire program. I think Erin put down the link to post-fire regeneration on our YouTube, but we also have resources online, theodorepayne.org, fire education. There's this fantastic booklet that has all this information about fire and fire adaptability and landscaping. And we specifically mention the oaks and how they catch
it's
fires.
fabulous. And you can tell your neighbors the reason why is, again, the thick bark, the leaves that are evergreen, they're hard to burn because they're full of water. And that's why they're the ember catchers.
Can we use the term passive pyrophytes there?
Yes, why not?
That was a really good term. I think that will shut your neighbor up.
And what's also, I guess, when you talked about the slow burn, Brenda, it reminded me of like when you build a campfire, there's some woods that are so hard to burn, but once they finally catch fire, they do burn slowly. And I think with an oak, that's the case where it's really hard for it to ignite. And that's why it's a really good tree to stop fires, because it doesn't want to fully burn. Like a live oak, that's not a part of its life cycle. It doesn't really want to come down to the ground. So
that's why you knock on wood, Terry, specifically oak, because it's strong and it's not going to burst into flames like pine does.
Okay, so we also we have some more questions in the chat.
Oh yeah,
I want to get to everybody. So Ellen has a big, massive, large brain question for you.
Oh wow. Okay.
Climate change affecting fire cycles. What can we do?
Oh, that's I don't have any answers other than let's cut our carbon emissions immediately.
Yeah.
But
plant native plants.
Yep. The first step would be to plant the native plants. That's like one of the best ways, because this threads into the question before about the fire intensity and frequency with introduced species, like for example, eucalyptus. There are plant species out there in fire-prone areas, in environments that encourage burning. So they will produce a lot of essential oils or a lot of tinder because they want that fire to sweep through so they can complete their life cycle. So when it comes to the eucalyptus, that the one species that we really know and is a problem in California, it encourages fire more because of the high oil content, and that's changing the intensity of fires. And so if you plant native plants, you're not changing the formula, you're maintaining what was here. So, but if you add introduced species, we don't know the unintended consequences of that. If they get out into a natural area, or if they're near your home and a fire is coming close, you know. But I'd say first step, just plant the native plants and then cut carbon emissions.
Okay, are you going to read Dana?
Go ahead. Are we going to Dana's question?
Yes, do Dana.
What about the chemicals they drop to stop fires? Is that dangerous for the soil? So Dana, last season Poppy Hour, we had fire officials from CAL FIRE, and we asked that about the slurry that they use. It's a soap. If Erin can put in the chat the link to that one, it's all about how the fire, the chemicals, and the ash, how it affects our water sources as well. So short answer is it dangerous for the soil? Yeah. And ash is dangerous for the water. So it's, you know, the give and take. That's why I think, Terry, you were talking about traditional burns, right?
Yeah. And thank you for taking that question, because I would not have known that.
Yeah. Oh, Terry, you don't know I go. In my spare time when I'm not here, I'm on working fires.
I love it.
That's right.
Why I feel like we have a spark between each other.
Oh. When I'm not doing fireworks, I'm, you know, at a fire scene that I did not cause. So yeah. So watch that one. Last season it was what was it? Someone from the Chaparral Institute and someone from CAL FIRE. and it was all about fire in Chaparral. And those resources are still online on our YouTube channel. And remember to subscribe because we have cool stuff.
Yes. All right, I'm ready for another question.
Well, let's talk about George and how he said Brenda just impressed me. Okay.
George had a question too. Let's
Okay,
get George's question about Joshua trees.
Oh, what about Joshua tree?
Any idea how Joshua tree, very unlikely, and yucca can resprout from the base botanically after fire?
I don't think, I could be wrong. I don't really fully know the full fire cycles of like the desert edges, but from what I understand, that those areas are not really meant to burn.
Yeah, Joshua trees grow so slowly.
Yeah, and they do resprout. Okay, but I think with the fire intensity increasing and maybe the frequency, that again can tire out or really just completely destroy a plant. So if my feeling, I don't know for sure, but my feeling is if a fire had to sweep through Joshua tree or any areas where there's Joshua trees, if it's quick and low intensity, they'll be okay. But if it's slow and hot, and I think that's safe to say for most plants, it's not going to be a pretty sight.
So question.
Yeah.
Lignotubers and the other ones that I'm thinking of. Rhizomes. Thank you.
Yes.
Lignotubers and rhizomes. How deep do they get into the ground to where a fire doesn't affect them? So let's start with rhizomes, lignotubers, and bulbs. Like at what depth?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know how to answer that because it depends on the plant and it depends on the intensity of the fire. So even if something that is adapted for fire and is at the right depth, if a fire is too hot, too slow, that can, if the fire makes its way through into that soil layer, it's kind of game over. So it depends on so many factors. Yeah, but the deeper the bulb or the rhizome or the root or the lignotuber, the safer they will be. But again, you don't want to be too deep because it takes a lot of resources to grow through that depth of the soil, right? So there's that sweet spot. But again, it depends on the intensity of the fire.
Okay. And then Laura, I hope that we answered your question about oaks. Please talk more about the fire catching oaks. It's in the plans, maybe not this season, but soon, October, all things oaks.
October.
So, yeah, you heard it here first.
Mm-hmm.
So now that I said it, I guess we're going to have to do it, right?
Official.
It's official, but unofficial. October Fiesta. I don't know what we're going to do, but for October, and Oaktober, things about oaks, fire resistance, all of these wonderful, wonderful things. Okay, George, the lignotuber is intact since the bush fire jumps from canopy to canopy in Australia due to the high oil content. So something like that would be pines, right? The canopy fire, oils.
Mm-hmm. It will jump over and over. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Oh,
thanks, George. Oh, what was that one?
Edgar has a good question.
Oh, okay.
You ask it, Katie, because I think you're going to give it more life.
Okay, I'll do my best, Edgar. Okay, Terry, if you were a plant, which fire strategy would you employ?
Oh, me? I think I'm okay, there's two sides to me. There's one side where I'm a big weenie, so I'd be my bulb and just hide.
Oh, okay. Can we all answer this? Can we go around, Terry, Katie,
yes.
Brenda?
Oh, yeah.
And then but the other side of me, I do have, it runs in my family line, but we do have a kind of a vengeful side. So I may be a full top kill burn type and then resprout. But I think in reality, I'll be the weenie, the bulb, and hide deep underground. What about you, Katie?
I think I would be a reseeder because you've put out your seeds and then they start over fresh with new genetic material. Whereas the resprouters are all clones of the parent plant. So I would be gone, but I feel like it's more hopeful for the reseeders because then you have a whole new population with all these different unique snowflakes that can all do better.
This is exposing our personalities.
I would be Melosa Millerina. I already said that.
That's a resprouter.
A resprouter. As long as you don't damage the roots, I'm coming back. You can't get rid of me. I'm here. I'm here. I'm here for it. I'm here. I'm gonna live through this fire.
Yes. Right? You're a survivor.
I'm a survivor.
You're not gonna give up.
I'm not. And I'm thank you, Alicia. You feel me. Thank you for that. And you know, in my offsprings, like we're here. Yeah. We're here.
Oh, here's the thing. You know the categories I gave? Not every
Yes.
plant sticks to one category. It's like in life, it's a spectrum.
Multiple.
So there are some plants that will top kill, but also reseed at the same time. So there are some plants that double dip into different categories. And that's the beauty of nature.
Like the manzanitas, right?
Yep.
They have, different adaptations. Well, thank you, Terry. I think we got to everyone's questions. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you to our sponsors again, Southern California Edison and Metropolitan Water District. Katie, if people want to see more, where do they go?
They should follow us on Instagram at Theodore Payne, Facebook, Theodore Payne Foundation, and then join our newsletter. It's at theodorepayne.org, all the way at the bottom. That will subscribe you to our email so you can find out about all of our exciting things going on. We're having a summer sale right now, clearing out a lot of plants, really good quality plants for 15% off or 25% off if you're a member. Become a member today and show your support, show your love. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have big plans of being more active on here, making more videos, and turn on notifications for whenever we post something. Share this video if you enjoyed it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you for the member support. Terry has another class coming up. Aaron put the link in the chat. We are taking a break in August, but we'll see you according to my calendar, September 1st. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night. Happy planting.
Alicia's the MVP, most valuable plant.
Oh, I love that.
Most valuable plant.
You have a good summer too. It's time for rest in this climate. So I hope everyone's resting.
Yes. Thanks, guys.